In our previous video we created this employee grid, and now we're going to extend its functionality to add in some filtering buttons. Let's bring up the completed application here. We're going to add in the header that you see here, the title, and then these three filtering buttons. What these buttons do is they set the value of the employee type column to filter the data records by. Now this occurs on the client side, not on the server side. So this is going to happen locally without requiring a callback. Part-time, and then finally we have the clear filters, which is just going to remove all the filters that we've set. Another nuance that you can see slightly here is that employee management is aligned on the same area with the full-time, part-time buttons. And these buttons here are positioned on the right hand side of the module. Even though the module is resized, those buttons retain their location. So we're going to create that now in our source. Let's bring that up here. And from before we had the employee grid defined, but that was pretty much it. So what we're going to do now is build in that header with the buttons. Since the header and the buttons are both on the same line, if you will, we need to create a widget that is an esPanel widget, and it tells that those widgets within it are going to be aligned horizontally. So we do this through the creation of an esPanel widget, and that's by specifying the attribute of widget, esPanel. And then we have a number of options that we can provide it. So we have an orientation, and this is now horizontal. So this says that every item within this panel will be horizontally positioned. And we're going to set the height of this to, let's do 30 pixels. So this is a 30 pixel high panel, horizontally aligned content. So the first item in the content is going to be the employee management header, and the second item in here is going to be the set of buttons. So we're going to have to wrap that as well into a panel. So we're going to do esPanel again. And the position of this is going to be fixed to the right hand side of the container that it's in. Okay. Within this esPanel, we now need to create our three buttons. So the first button is the full-time. The second button is the part-time. And then the third button is the clear filters. So for the full-time, what we're going to do is we're going to be executing a function, and we'll call it setFilter. We do this by setting up the onClick event handler, and we give it the name of the function within the module that we want to execute. So setFilter. The next parameter we're going to specify here is the value that we want to assign to this button. So we'll do value equals ft, and this is what we'll be using to filter on. So let's go ahead and do the same thing with this one. onClick equals setFilter, and value is equal to pt this time. Now for the clear, we're going to do a little bit different function. So we're going to execute something called clear filter instead. Okay, so we've got two functions to create. We've got the setFilter and the clear filter, and we do those down in the module themselves. We can place it really within anywhere we want within here. Let's just do it after the destroy. So let's create the setFilter and the clear filter. So setFilter, and that is just a function. Now the set filter, we need to bring in the context of the object which called this function. In this case it's going to be a button. So what context will do is it will pass in the values associated with that object or that widget. And then the clear filter, okay, is also a function. In this case we really don't care about the values that were associated with it in the button. We just really want to just clear that the filters. Okay, so within the set filter we want to reduce the number of records that are visible in the grid, and where we actually do that is in the data source, and we do it on the data source so that we don't actually have to query TM1 again for that data and come back with just the records that we want to filter. So we do this through this data sources, and our emp list was the data source that we were working with, and we want to run the function called filter. Now filter takes a couple of parameters, or it takes an object, and that object is the first value or property we want to set on that object is the field that we want to do the filtering on. And so in our case that was employee type. The operator, which is how we want to do the comparison, we're going to use is equal to. And then finally the value we want to filter, which will be context.value. So this gives us the value that we specified in the HTML as PT or FT. Now on the clear filter side, we basically want to run the same function, list filter, but we want to pass it no data at all, and that will go ahead and remove all the filters that are set. Okay, so we have our buttons, we have our event handlers, and we know how we're going to be filtering this grid. Let's go ahead and save that, and we'll bring up the application. Let's go to ours. And so now you see employee management with the 3 buttons, and if we click on the full-time, part-time, and the clearing of the filters. So all we have left now are the formatting of these buttons. Let's go ahead and change our code now to incorporate that. And we'll come back in here and we'll add a style to these buttons, and we'll do that through a class. And we'll call this style highlight btn. Do the same thing here. And on this one, okay, and we go now to our styles, app styles, and we will paste in the styles that we have already set up. So this just basically sets up the coloring and the formatting. Now when we save this and return back to our application and refresh, we now have our employee management header, our styled buttons that filter full-time and part-time as well as clear. This concludes part 4 of the Enterprise Services Framework tutorial.